Hello and welcome to the Loren Lahav Show, where every week we bring you fascinating guests with inspiring stories of success and overcoming obstacles from the worlds of sports, business, and entertainment. To support this channel, please subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and hit the like button so that we can deliver you the best content possible. And now, thank you very much and enjoy the show. I'm very excited to have her here today. She's originally from Asheville, North Carolina. She's an American talk show host, television producer, mom, wife, author, entrepreneur, and a philanthropist. She has shared the stage with Tony Robbins, Gary Vaynerchuk, Erin Brockovich, and many more. And she has a huge heart. I'm absolutely thrilled to have her on the show, the queen of personal development, live from Las Vegas, Nevada. Please welcome, here is Loren Lahav. Woo!
Hey, Ronnie, how are you? So glad you're here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for being here. And it's wow. Just when you're looking at your life today and you're looking back at your journey, just hearing that, what comes to mind to you?
Oh my gosh. I just think, wow. Like I think about, just being from a small town and kind of how people thought my life was supposed to look. You go to school, you get a job, you have kids, and you die, with regards to pretty much. And I look, and I was always kind of a rebel. I've always been a rebel, I think, and didn't really follow the path the way everybody expected me to. And I'm glad I didn't. I'm glad I listened to my heart and listened to the pull every time that I felt it coming on, even though I got criticized a lot, a lot.
Well, that's always when you stick your head out of the crowd, then you kind of like open yourself up to get criticized. What is it that you wanted to get, that you wanted to become as a kid? Was it something traditional, or did you what was it?
Well, I think as a kid, I think most kids, if they are like me, and if I apologize if my dog's barking a little bit, I think absolutely I wanted to become a veterinarian for sure, until I understood that there was blood and humans involved, right? Like in the parents, the people that own that have to deal a lot more, not just with the pets, but the animals themselves, but the people. So yeah, I changed my mind real quickly. And I've always been into debate, as you probably know. And so I knew that in some way, when I went to college, that I was going to be a broadcast journalist. I was actually offered a job in Atlanta to work at CNN when CNN first started off. And I couldn't pronounce certain words, presidents of certain countries or prime ministers. And instead of asking for help, Ronnie, I was like, oh, this isn't what I'm supposed to do. I decided to change my path, which I'm very glad that I did, but I got into sports marketing. And so it's funny when you were talking entertainment and sports and everything, I'm like, well, I actually have done a little bit of everything, not an athlete as an athlete, but more as just in those different worlds. So yeah, that's what I thought I was going to do. And then I went and got my doctorate of waitressing and then moved to California. And then a little bit of everything has happened since then.
Wow, that's really fascinating. You already went a little bit into your background. So from all of that, from a little bit of everything, and your doctorate of waitressing, where I'm sure that the one or the other can relate to that, because we all need to kind of find a way to get our ends met, especially when we are just starting out. How did you then get into personal development and not just like discover it as something where you would say, okay, that's interesting, I'm going to use this for me, but like really find that as a field to work in?
When I really think back to it, I've always been into personal development. I mean, even since I was a little girl, I was thinking back to my dad, who was an optometrist for 52 years. He was always making sure that we were reading books about personal development. He loved, but he did a part-time with a company called Shackley. And so I was always listening to Jim Rohn. I didn't even realize it, that I was always listening to Jim Rohn as a little girl, had no idea that's who it was, and that would ever, but I loved it. I always was learning. And then the backstory might be when I was in college, my boyfriend bought me a book when we were coming back from a football game. And the name of the book was Unlimited Power. And he goes, oh my God, like that is so you're unlimited power. I'm like, and so he picks up the book, and obviously it was Tony Robbins' book. It was November 1987. And he picks it. And back then there were no like personal development books, no cookbooks, no, everything was just books all together. And he picks up the book and he goes, one day we're going to go to a Tony Robbins seminar. And I'm like, I don't know what the heck you're talking about. I'm going to Atlanta. I'm going to go work for CNN. And I took the book and I traveled across the United States with it. And little did I know that I was going to end up at Tony Robbins' house, November 1989. So I think I don't know. I think one of my big things is always be learning. Even when I was waitressing, I loved learning. I loved hearing people's stories. For me, it wasn't just to make money. It was like, who was I going to meet? What interesting stories. I mean, my very first customer was Howard Head from Head Tennis Wear. And when I found out who he was, I was like, so tell me, how did you create the oversized racket? And he's like, I couldn't see the ball anymore. And then, it just so many, I love just hearing people's stories and like, what could I learn from them to make my life better? And I think I learned so much even from that Howard Head story, that there's so many wonderful possibilities that are even right in front of us, but we're trying to make things so much more difficult than they really are.
Oh, that's so funny. And I'm just realizing, I think I had one of those head oversized rackets when I was a kid, because then I could hit the ball better.
Yep.
When I was learning out. It was, I think the Head 720 was the name of the record. And like the Head 660 or something was the normal one. But yeah, I enjoyed it to have a bit of a bigger racket in a way.
Right, exactly. But I think personal development, like I think that all of us, right, you can't go out there and have any influence until you influence yourself and know what influences you. So I think we got to always be looking for that. Life is kind of a personal development journey if you choose to look at it that way, right? Like, who was I? Who do I want to become? How do I want to show up in the world? What do I need to do to go from where I am to where I want to be? And I think if you look at life as this beautiful personal development journey, then you'll enjoy the journey a lot more, right? And that you will love who you were, but you also are more inspired by who you're becoming. So
I think it's a beautiful way to phrase it. And I believe that also everybody watching our show or listening to it is kind of on the way of, or on the path of growing and growth. And I think especially now that has become more and more mainstream. And when you started out in the late 80s, basically, or even before that, personal development was very, very niche. So you're really a veteran in that field. So what does personal development mean to you?
Personal development to me means always be growing. I mean, it means just to look at your life and to go, okay, this is great. I think it's about being, how would I say this, happily discontent. So grateful for what you have, but always be looking for how you can do better, be more. I'm a little Jewish girl from the South, and from when I grew up in the South, there were not many Jewish kids there. And I remember this lady that worked for my dad, and she said, Doc, I hope you're not offended. She said, but you are the most Christ-like person that I've ever met. And my dad goes, why would I be offended by that? And he said, that's like the biggest compliment you could ever pay me. And, I think growing up, my parents always taught me to just do the right thing, meaning to live a Christ-like life, however you want to look at it. And that means growing, that means stretching, that means putting yourself on the line, that means helping people, that means, being a leader. And I think I've always led my life that way, is just that was very profound to me as a little girl. I remember, and people that maybe aren't from the United States won't be able to relate to this, but I remember listening to, I forgot his name. He was a minister from the Crystal Cathedral. And
Norman Vincent Peale?
No, I forgot what his name was, but we would listen on Sunday mornings. We would listen to sermons. I mean, there was, my father would always say the worst thing you could be is be ignorant. So you need to understand and appreciate everyone and where they're from, what their backgrounds are. And I think that I think that just personal development means to me is not be ignorant, right? Like do the work, find out what is available and how you can take your life to the next level to help others.
I think that's very beautiful. And especially in the times that we're living today, I think it's very, very important to know that there is more than one side to the story.
Yeah.
There are different aspects. And if we would actually not like, if you just open our horizons and looking into also what does the other person say, we don't necessarily need to agree.
Absolutely.
Just coming from a point of understanding instead of a point of blocking it out right away.
Yeah. For sure. I mean, I would always say to people growing up, I want people to love me for who I am, not what I am. Right. And I wanted them to just get to know me and what I stand for and my values in just how I show up. And that's why, and I think that's honoring who you are. So so I guess I've always been in personal development without even realizing it until just now. So.
And we always are. So going back to the journey, and obviously the biggest name in personal development nowadays is Tony Robbins. It totally is. And one part of your story, not everything, of course, but one part of your story is kind of like also how you started out in that field, was that you were working with Tony Robbins and you've been, in one way, you're still working with him at some point, but you were also even an employee for more than a decade, I believe, at Robbins Research.
Yep.
So tell us how that came to be, because nowadays when people approach Tony, or when people see Tony Robbins, it's like this larger than life personality. It's like this, oh my God, the person from the Netflix show or movie, or the person from, I don't know, from all kinds of things, fill stadiums and so on. But you've known him like from the late 80s or early 90s, and it was quite different, wasn't it?
So funny. Somebody just sent me a picture from 1990. Let me see if I can find it. This is a crew picture from 1994. I don't know if you can see there. Something happened there. From 1994. You don't know if you can see that. They literally sent that yesterday. And Tony's right there in the middle. And he's sitting beside Jim Robbins, who was his dad. This is Jim Robbins, his dad.
Uh-huh.
He took his name. And, I think, like I said, I got Tony's book. My boyfriend bought me his book in November 1987. I moved to Colorado. I took the book with me. I ended up November 1989. A group of people asked me if I wanted to go deliver food to the homeless. And I said, yes, that sounds great. And we ended up at this big house in Del Mar, California. And it turned out, and this house just happened to be in the shape of a castle. Tony was 29 at the time. I had no idea who he was. I didn't know anything of where I was, because everybody had a big house in Del Mar, right? And so he just showed up, and they go, about 25 people there. We went and delivered food to about 100 people. And I'm walking around the turret of the castle, and I see this guy in the present, this guy in Nelson Mandela. And then I get to this giant shadow box. I'm like, oh my God, that's that book that my boyfriend bought me in college. And Tony comes up behind me and he's like, hey, have you read my book? I'm like, no, but I have it. And I'm like, oh, that wasn't very smart to say to the dude. And he goes, look, I saw you had a really great time today. And I think what people don't understand, it's what Keith Cunningham talks a lot about. You got to get in line and you got to stay in line. And Tony got in line. He said that this was what he was going to do, but he didn't get out of line when something looks a little bit better. He stayed in line. Like back then it was delivering 100 baskets. Now it's 100 billion meals, right? He saw the vision of what things were going to look like 10 years from now, even though people told him he was crazy. I can't remember how many times people would tell him he was crazy when we went. I remember when we first went to the UK for the first time. They said, oh, it'll never work in the UK, right? And then they said, it'll never work here. It'll never work there. It'll never work there. And what I love the most about him is he didn't listen to the noise, right? He didn't listen to all the noise. There's so much that is around us. And he just saw that vision of what was possible, of what he was going to create in the 90s, what he was going to create in the 2000s, what he was going to create. He really did a short term, a medium term, and a long term vision of what's possible. So I can't even imagine what it is now, but I respect him so much for getting in line and staying in line. And the thing also that is amazing about him is he's never looking to go, oh, I did great. He's always looking, he goes, what was great and what can I make better the next time? So he's always looking for how can I make the next moment better for people. And then I also love how curious he is about people. He really does believe that everybody's story matters. So I've learned so much from him, so much from him. And then I've done it in my own unique way, right? I didn't try to be another Tony Robbins, because I can't, and I don't want to be another Tony Robbins. Tony's Tony. I don't want to waste the person that I am. And that's the thought, how can I take what I've learned and apply it to me as a mom, as a wife, as a entrepreneur, as an independent woman, an interdependent woman. What can I do to create it in my own unique way? So
Okay, first of all, you said some beautiful things here. One thing that I really love is you got to get in line and you got to stay in line,
Yeah.
because this is very, very actually pretty much the opposite of today's instant gratification world
Yeah.
of like, oh, it doesn't work right now. Okay, let's just do something else.
Yeah.
Instead of, no, this is what I want to do and I believe in it and I'm going to find a way.
Yep.
And just to be there, and I'm sure you've had the same, but I've been doing what I'm doing now for the last 15 years.
Right.
And in the beginning, people are just looking at you like, okay, is this guy for real? Is this guy like, is this somebody we can take serious?
Yep.
Is this something like that? And you're not going to get the big jobs usually when you start out. So oftentimes it takes some years or maybe even a decade to become an overnight sensation.
Yep.
And the other thing, what I really loved about what you said was that you did not want to be another Tony Robbins.
Yep.
That you want to do your own thing, because it's never about being the copy of somebody else. It's always about figuring out who you really are. So how did you figure out who you really are, Loren?
I listened to what people would, well, first of all, I would, when things would come out of my mouth, I would almost like feel like if that really resonated with me or not. Right. Like, or if did it feel like that I was trying to be someone else. Right. Like I'm like, that's not me. Like, come on, that's not me. That's not who I am. I would, and then I'd ask myself like, well, what is you? And I would really spend the time discovering who I am. I'd say that there's 4 different stages that people go through. There's, discovering who you are, right? Then there's staying true to who you are. Then there's like rediscovering who you are. And then there's staying connected to who you are. And I think that, I've been through some rediscovery stages. It was interesting. I had somebody and I know when I went through those stages of when I was like still discovering who I was, right? Like I noticed some of the patterns. It's interesting now when I see people and I work with people and I see that, oh, they're still discovering who you are. They're not staying true yet, right? And so I think that a big thing was I really listened. I'm like, was that me or was that somebody else? Right? Or did that feel right? That was like really in line with who I am? Or is it just like off? So I started to pay attention. I think awareness is key with regards to that. And I'd ask for feedback a lot. I would, especially any opportunity that I had to speak, whether it was at my kid's school or whether it was, I just last week, before my event, I flew to go do an event that my niece asked me to do for like 700 women in Washington, D.C. And I would, and it was a very different crowd. It was a big stretch for me. And I just had to really take the time and go deep and think about what's the most important thing that I want people to feel when they leave after hearing me. What is the emotion that I want them to feel? And I went back to that and I got so grounded about that. Then I'm like, okay, I know what I need to do. What's in my toolbox. I collect stories. I collect stretches. I collect, games, everything so that I know what's in my toolbox that I can pull out for a different crowd. And I think that was the big thing for me. I would listen. I remember once I was in Dallas, Texas, and I was doing these events for moms. It was 2000. I call them Millennium Mom events. And my friend, she said, do you realize how much you touch your hair? And I had no idea. I was just totally unconscious about it. So now I make sure that I like keep my hands available so that I'm not touching and I use my hands more so that I don't touch my hair, right? But little things that I would always ask for coaching. I would ask people to tell me about the pad words that I would use. So I got the awareness.
Wow, very, very beautiful. And again, there are quite some things that I actually could want to touch on. I'm first going to start off with discovering who you are. And you also created some time ago some affirmation cards. Mm-hmm. I am affirmation card. Mm-hmm. What exactly is that? And what is the power behind the words I am?
Right. So I created the cards because in my planner, I would have my I am statements. I'm loving, I'm honest, I'm passionate, I'm compassionate, I'm kick-ass, I'm full of faith, I'm God's girl, I'm turmeric, you're tight, I'm a sexy salsa dancer, I'm an awesome wife, I'm a kick-ass coach, I'm hilarious. And I would do that to fill myself up. That was my premium fuel. So what happened was every time that I would do a talk, I've done this for probably, 18 years. Anytime I do a talk, I always talk about, I believe that your rituals, the questions you ask yourself and the people that you hang around. That's for me, what it all boils down to. And anytime I would do a talk, I would go back to my I am rituals, talking about giving myself premium fuel. And the reason I turned them into cards was there was a lady who was a friend, and she said, I heard you speak, and I just want you to know how much your I am statements meant to me. And I was like, why don't I just turn them into cards? Like, why wouldn't I just like have them beautifully designed? And I hired you know me, Ronnie, if I do anything, I'm going to do it right. So I hired like this one of a kind designer. And then I had this beautiful box made, and I had all of these things. And I did it because of that woman. The woman, she was a breast cancer survivor. And I wanted her, it was one person that I wanted to help, one person to make a difference. It wasn't about selling millions of cards and making millions of dollars. I was like, if I could help that one woman and that she could pick a card, that it would change her life. So we all know, right? If you go back to Moses and when Moses went to the burning bush and God says to him, I am that I am. And that words I am are so powerful, what we say to ourselves. So I know for me, that's been my premium fuel. I do it anytime I get on stage, anytime I do a meeting. Right before we got on this beautiful interview, I mean, I picked up this one. I picked up the I am abundant card, right? So every time, and it keeps me grounded and centered and remembering what I need to remember for myself. So.
It's very beautiful, and thank you for sharing that. And yeah, it's so powerful. Like everything you put after I am, it's really something that becomes your identity. Especially when you ingrain it, when you repeat it, when you like an affirmation or an incantation. The other thing that I really loved when you were talking about becoming a speaker, that was really, really something that I loved a lot, was that you said that you always have an emotional outcome. That you always think about, what do I want them to feel? It's also for me, also when I teach people, or when I coach people how to speak, it's also have an outcome, know your audience, and also have an emotional outcome. Like, what is the emotion that you want to leave behind? Because it actually doesn't matter if you're a speaker, if you're a coach, if you're a salesperson, or whatever it is.
If you're having a conversation with anybody, if you're having a conversation.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. The moment that you're actually having a conversation with somebody else, it's always about, they're never going to remember what you said exactly, but they always remember how you made them feel. So you also said that you took every opportunity to speak. How did you get into speaking, and how did you learn it?
Well, I think we all need the skills. Like we all need, right? Like my daughter today is doing she's in a forensics class, and it's kind of a interesting, morbid thing, but she has to be the defending attorney for, unfortunately, the guy who is the person. He did something really bad here in the United States, right? And she goes, and I said, okay, well, how do you want to make people feel, right? Like I said, like, what is it? And I asked her the same question. I think that the reason why I think I've always loved just getting out there, I think that not to be the message, but to be the messenger, whether it was defending somebody that didn't have their voice or didn't use their voice. I think that I've always been that way since I was like 12 years old. Like someone needs to speak out. Someone needs to, the voice needs to be heard. So I've always loved debate. I've always loved getting out there and, like I said, being the messenger, not the message. And I think that, how did I get involved? I just went out there and started doing it. I think that there's such an importance of just getting out there and discovering your voice and finding your voice and finding like what really makes you unique. And I always say that I'm real, I'm raw, I'm right from the heart. And that's what people get from me. I just feel very deeply. And, but I also make sure I'm very prepared. I don't just go out there and just kind of wing it either. I make sure I think about like, what really is my outcome? What are some of the tools that I'm going to use in my toolbox? Many years ago, there was a lady that spoke at an event. I'm not going to use her name, but I was watching her, and I think that that's the other thing you got to watch. And I was looking, I'm like, gosh, like she didn't like speak that much. But she was using like videos, and she was using other people's stories to get everybody to feel emotional. And I'm like, well, that's brilliant, right? And now, like with YouTube and so many great TikTok videos and I don't know, so many great things. If you're getting started, find a couple things maybe that you can use as you kind of warm up and find your style. So is there a video that you could use to kind of move people emotionally? It might not be you, but if you can see that, oh my gosh, that made an impact on people. And then what do? They think of you when they think of that video, right? So I think that we always talk about this, right? The person that's most resourceful always wins. So, use those resources that are around you, whether it's a video, whether it's music, whether it's other people, whether it's exercises, just play around with it and see what feels right for you.
I think that's a great point, because the greatest resource that you can have is not money, is not this and that and so on. It's really the resourcefulness. Like, how resourceful can you be in the moment when it really counts?
Yep.
How do you, because, and you're very well known as a person who is very, very resourceful. How did you learn that skill? Was it something that you always had? And where does it come from? Like, where do you draw your resources from when the moment comes?
I think I've always been that way, but if we want to go back to the Tony Robbins story, it's kind of funny. I think that for me, it's just, you find a way, like you just make a way. It's just, there's not an option. You just figure it out. I remember when we were doing a wealth mastery program and it was really boring. Tony looked at the whole syntax. I think this was back in about 1991, 1992. And he looked at it, he goes, this is incredibly boring. I can't do this for everybody. And it was probably about 5 hours before the event was starting. And he goes, we need to make this fun. We need like a wheel. We need like a Harley Davidson. We need jewelry. We need this. We need that. And like, he's going off. And he looks at me. He's like, Loren, go find all that stuff. And I'm like, how long do I have? He goes, you got 5 hours. And I'm like, oh my God. Right. And I didn't go. I don't have time. I don't have the resources. We were in Phoenix, Arizona. I didn't know anybody in Phoenix, Arizona. I didn't know anything. Right. But I was like, I will make a way. I will make it happen. And I found jewelry. Not only did I find jewelry, I found the best jeweler in Phoenix, Arizona, who actually I'm going to see in 2 weeks, who's still a friend of mine, 30 years later. So found jewelry. I found a Harley. I found a VW bug. He wanted some blue 1967 bug that he drove back then. So I think for me, it's a game. It's fun. I'm like, I can make it happen. I can find a way. I'll do it. I'll do whatever that it takes to find a way. So I don't look at it like it's work. I look at it like it's an adventure. And my parents always taught me, I think because we lived way far from the city. We lived about, 30 minutes from the city. And so my mom would always say, we're going on an adventure. So I would always look for all of the things to make it an adventure versus like we have to drive 30 minutes every time to go to school. So I think I've just always been that way.
And I think that's very beautiful that you're saying that, because that also shows your beliefs behind it. Because when you're saying it's an adventure, that's a difference to somebody who crumbles maybe when there comes an opportunity to shine, in terms of them, because they're saying something else to themselves. They're saying like, oh my God, I cannot do this, or whatever kind of stuff, what's going on in your internal dialogue. So yeah. It's really beautiful to see that. One, staying on the topic of actually public speaking, motivational speaking, you already brought a few things of what advice you would give to somebody who is just starting out. When you're looking at today's field of motivational speaker, first of all, I believe that there are more motivational or public speakers or something out there than ever. How do you see that? Like, how has it developed over the last decades? And also, how do you see the scene right now? Is this all? Is this all for real?
Do you really want to know, or are you just asking? What do you want to know?
No, I really want to know.
Well, first of all, I think everybody has a story. And I think everybody's story is important. I think that you have to, once again, really stay true to what's important to you. I've never looked at myself as a public speaker. I've never looked at myself as a motivational person. I've looked at what is the message that I really want people to hear from me. Like, what's the message that I can give most? And, as you know, this past weekend, I just did a dream come true for me. And I did it like I feel like Frank Sinatra. I feel like I did it my way, even though everybody was kind of like, oh my gosh, you have too many people on stage and this is ridiculous. And I'm like, you know what? When you put up the amount of money that I did and when you do it, then you can do it whatever you want. And I can't tell you how many people were just like, this is exactly what I needed. And so, like I said, I'm really aware. I'm aware of what people are missing. We always talk about when you can heal the wound, you're the hero. And I know as a woman, what the message has always been that I wanted to help get across for people. And that I hear so many women say that they're just tired. And I knew that that was my opportunity to create something that would help heal that wound for people. So I would say one, like I said, do your homework, see what works really well for you, right? I see so many people with this kind of, I can tell you exactly whose program people went through because they have the same way of teaching people to do certain things. And it's like, and then when you see 5 in a row who've done the same one, you're like, oh my God, like there's like, oh, this, there's so many different ways to, to start a talk, to deliver a talk, there goes the house. Sorry, there it goes. It's a little crazy now, but and I'll reference Joseph McClendon, if those of you that might know Joseph McClendon, and those of you that are not from the Tony Robbins world, or just if you know who Joseph is. But I was living in Fiji, and Joseph could not go do a talk in Kuala Lumpur, and he asked me to go do it. And I watched all these videos of Joseph, and I call him and I'm like, Joseph, I can't do this. And he goes, what are you talking about, Loren? You do this every day. Like for 36 weeks a year, you do this every day. I go, I know, Joseph. I go, but you're just so funny. I go, I'm not just that funny. And he goes, Loren, but I use humor for him to get comfortable with the crowd. That's what he does. He shared with me. He said that he uses humor so that he gets comfortable with the crowd. And so finding out like what's your way to get comfortable with the crowd, I think is a really important thing. So mine is not humor, right? Mine is through a story, or mine's through asking a question sometime. So I think that you've got to find your style. And the way that you do that is even just start by going into a conversation with people. How do you feel comfortable? Do you feel comfortable asking a question? Do you feel comfortable complimenting someone? Do you feel comfortable referencing a story that you've heard? So I would say to people, just be real, because people can feel when you're real or when you're not, right? It's like, if it's like when you hear something, you're like, oh my God, again, here we're going with this whole like way, that this is the only way to do things. So that's what I would say to people. Be aware of just your daily conversations. Be aware of how you're showing up. And then when you feel really like in your power, I would say.
I think it's beautiful, and it comes back to, again, be yourself, discover who you really are, also discover who your audience really is. Like, who are you doing this for?
Mm-hmm.
And like you discovered that women are, for example, at the event that you just had, it's for women, and there are wounds to be solved and so on. And I remember once, now that you were saying this story with Joseph McClendon, a few years ago, I got called it was on a Monday. They said, there's an event on Friday, and they lost a speaker because he's sick. And if I could jump in, and then I was like, okay, what is it about? And they were like, yeah, that was a professor, and he worked at Volkswagen, and he actually, it was going to be something about IT versus IE, like IT versus industrial engineers and so on. And I was thinking, like, what do I have to do with that? Like, that has nothing to do with what I'm doing. And they're like, yeah, we know. I know you have like a sports background and so on, but maybe we can do something in a way that actually fits you in there. And that made sense, because I could never have given that speech that he did, because it was not even my topic. But it's
that's really interesting that you said that. I don't talk about it that much, but I was back when I wrote my first book, and I was called by Harpo Studios, and they wanted me to do a show. And I was like, oh my God, this is Harpo Studios. This is 2002. This is the moment. Like, this is it. And my friend was like,
a TV show.
TV show. Yeah. On Oprah, to be on Oprah. And they called me, and I was like so excited. I was like sweating everywhere. And I said, what is the show you want me to do? And they go, we want you to do a show about how to get your husband to do more around the house. And I took a big deep breath and I go, I'm not your girl. And they go, you do realize that this is Harpo Studios, like Oprah Winfrey, like the show. And I'm like, I get it. Like, I get it. But I don't want to be known as the girl who got her husband to do more around the house. And that's when for me, I just started to say to myself, if I say yes to this, am I staying true to myself? Right. And that became my question always. And so I turn down some things sometimes for myself because I'm like, I'm not your girl. That's not really, what really resonates with me. Thanks very much. And I think the other thing is I'm not, how do I say this? I'm not driven by being paid for keynote talks. And that's not what drives me. I first find out if it really resonates with me. I don't say yes all the time, even if I've been accepted for a keynote. Lots of times I'm like, I got to find out, make sure that that's my peeps, right? And I'm not saying that all the time, and it's interesting because I show up differently when I'm not doing it for the money. I think lots of times, and once again, it's something that I learned from Tony a long time ago when he said, before he's like, when he would go to QVC, he's like, that's what
The home shopping thing.
Shopping network, when he would go, that's where he went to like make the income so that he could do what he loved, which was teaching events, right? And so like I learned a lot from him, like just as you're growing your business too, be willing, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, that look at, sometimes you might just have like a career that brings you in some stability. And then you don't seem when you're out, like as a speaker, like that you're desperate to get a talk or desperate to sell a program, right? That's just kind of like icing on the cake as well. Right. When we were together, that was icing on the cake for me. It wasn't like I was there. I was like, I got to spend time with my friends. I got to do this. I got to do that. And then I show up differently versus like, got to do this for the money. So.
Yeah, and that's fantastic. And really also that story with you and Oprah or the Oprah show, it really shows, because you really got to be careful also, like when there comes an opportunity, not every opportunity that shines gold is gold. Because maybe it is gold for somebody else, but if this is not the direction you want to go to, then there are so many. You just need to look at Hollywood. There are so many people who then took a role that they actually didn't want to do or didn't fit, and then they got burnt. And then
or they got stereotyped into something. I was just reading about Sharon Stone, right, when she did Basic Instinct, and then after that it was so hard for her to get another job because everybody kind of had her as this naughty girl with Basic Instinct, right? And what happened for her, or the same thing that happened, you're right, people got stereotyped as,
Or James Bond actors, most of them.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
He's James Bond. Or Harry Potter, whatever. Like, but let's go back to writing, because you also said that you, and I mentioned in the beginning, that you authored several books. One of them even was in the top 3 books of 2010 with the title Life Tune-Ups. What made you become a writer, and how did you start out?
Oh my gosh, I love to write. That's my passion. I was, as I said, I was a journalism major at the University of Georgia. So for me, writing ever since I was a little girl, I remember going into the forest, and I would just go and I would take a journal and I would just go out there with my dog and I would just write. So for me, it's always been a beautiful way just to express myself, whether I read it or not. Again, I love writing. I had amazing English teachers who inspired creative writing for me, even though I hated it at the time. I loved what I learned from them to just get that creativity out of me. But yeah, my book, Life Tune-Ups, that was a personal development book for women. And I was just like, okay, what lessons can I take that I've learned along this journey and just instill it, make it really easy for everybody to follow. And I made it so there was a book that was more that they could go back and really use those skills. It wasn't just like a one-time read. So I think I've always been like that. It's just it's a great release for me. I have a freaking gazillion journals. I have a gazillion notebooks, and I just love it. I just love to write.
When you I think for many people would love to write a book, would love to start a business and so on. And oftentimes they never get over the brainstorming phase where they're like, okay, either there are too many or too few ideas. Like, I don't know where to start. I have so many topics. Which one is the right one for you? And then they are stuck in that and a paralysis of analysis in a way. Like, how do you get over that hump? How do you decide on a topic that you say, all right, that's now what I'm going to do?
Well, I mean, that's a big thing for me when I wrote my first book. It was a book for moms. And I think most people are emotionally constipated. I think people know what the book is that they want to write. So I have people go through a process to see it is already done. Who has it helped? Who has it served? Once again, a great metaphor that I heard is that vision, when you have a vision, when you create that vision, it creates the action that you're going to take or that you're not going to take. So for me, I can't imagine like having a vision and not taking any action. So you got to look at some patterns of where else that shows up, for you in your life of like why you're not moving forward. But I made a public commitment. It was a big thing for me. I made a public commitment. I made a manifestation board of it. I mean, I know my winning formula for me to get the success that I have in my life. And back then there was no internet the way that there is. So I would go to Barnes and Noble and I'd buy a bunch of books and I'd think about what the cover of the book was going to look like. I started reaching out to like people that I wanted to do testimonials. I mean, I assumed that it was already done. I did photo shoots of what photos were going to be in the book and what the feeling was like of the book. So once again, I had the vision of what it was so that I knew what actions that I needed to take. So I would just say, just do it. I mean, even if it's like a 20-page book, just do it, right? What's the worst thing that's going to happen? And now there's so many tools, like you even shared some of the tools with me, with AI, at least it can give you maybe a brief overview and then you can like fill in between with your own voice. And like, let's say it gives you that basic outline of what you really want to talk about. And now there's so many great resources, that help you write book, ghost writers. I haven't never used resources like those, but I mean, I've found a writing coach, and I have a writing coach that I'm working on another book right now. And so I work with them and they help kind of take my ideas and help me sort them in the right way. But just do it. That's all I say. Just do it. I feel like I'm in the Nike commercial. Just do it.
Oh yeah, exactly. Another topic that you already have mentioned before when you said when you were mentioning how you met Tony at the like basically bringing out meals, and also you started your own journey of philanthropy where you fed more than 5,000 people through blessing backpacks and you help
every year. Yeah, so I do it on my 50th birthday, and I get 5,100, then 5,200, my 52nd, 53, 57, I'm moving to 58. So yes.
And that's it's beautiful. And also you brought hearing aids to more than 5,000 people in Vietnam. Why is giving so important to you? Because that's somehow a commonality from many people who are very successful, that they also love to give. Why is that for you a must?
Because I can. Because I can, because I have those resources nearby and I have the people that can help me make it happen. And so I feel that it's not an opportunity. I feel like it's a responsibility. I'm still waiting for the numbers this weekend, but I decided to do an auction at this event that I was putting on, and I brought in a live auctioneer, and he's like, Loren, we're still counting because we can't, it's almost 4 days later. And he's like, oh my gosh, like everybody wanted to give. And I can't wait to give these checks to knowing what that it can do for people, knowing that it can help somebody, I have a few virtual assistants, and I have a girl who's in the Philippines, and she hasn't done, some work for me in just a couple weeks, but I know she has to have a C-section to have her baby. And in the Philippines, a C-section is $1,200 US, I guess. And so I told her, I said, I'm not just going to give you money. We're going to, do it. We're going to do this. And so that you can trade for some work. And I wanted her to earn it because I think there's something about earnership. But, she sent me a picture of the baby today,
Wow.
in advance because I could, And I know she's going to work, and I know she's going to do all those things, but I don't do it for any other reason other than I mean, I've had times where I was like, I had more months at the end of the money and wondering like how I was going to get through it. And and some people just have a bad streak or something happens in their life. And, so many people are just one paycheck away from being homeless. I mean, so many people that just have something happen. I don't know their stories, but it's my responsibility. I don't do it other than it's the right thing to do. So.
Wow, very beautiful. And also, one of the things that I also gotta give you kudos is because you love to connect people, you love to bring people together that actually can make an impact. And let's switch over for some rapid fire questions here, nearing to the end. Who is somebody that you admire and look up to, and why?
Who is somebody that I admire and look up to, and why? Gosh, somebody I look up to and admire. Well, she just passed away, but she was my favorite. Was Barbara Walters, just being the pioneer, willing to, she had no judgment about who she interviewed. She interviewed everybody. I mean, she was the pioneer of the broadcast world, and she had guts. She had gusto. She was elegant and graceful and badass all at the same time. So yes, Barbara Walters.
Wow. The best book you ever read, and why?
Ooh, the best book I ever read, The Alchemist, for sure.
Wow, I love that. Why?
Oh, but if I tell you why, then we're going to give away the punchline for everybody. But you know why?
All right. Okay, I'm going to leave it like that. One thing you cannot live without.
One thing that I cannot live without. Wow. I think my. Oh gosh, one thing I cannot live without. Do I say it's? I don't know. Probably my dog. I mean, dogs. I have to have my dogs.
Very beautiful. Very beautiful. Before we wrap it up, and before I'm going to ask you a final question, before that, let me know, where can people find out more about you? Like if they got inspired, if they say, wow, I really want to find out more about Loren, I want to work with her or something, where can they find you?
They can find me, they can go to I am Loren Lahav on Instagram. They can go to my website, www.lorenlahav.com. They can find out about the Own Your Worth experience at ownyourworthexperience.com. They can find me everywhere. I think I'm not so good at all of the channels, but probably Instagram and Facebook are the best.
Okay, very beautiful. What do you want to have the audience take away from this conversation?
Stay true to who you are. Stay true to who you are. Don't waste the person that you are. We all have our unique gift. I mean, we all do work in the same, I guess, world, but we're all so different. And just stay true to that, because otherwise then you'll live a really fulfilling life and you won't have any regrets, because you know that you followed what mattered most to you. So that's what I would say to everybody.
Beautiful. Very, very beautiful. And I got to ask one last thing.
Okay.
In the background, we see a lot of, for those of you watching it, if you're in the podcast, then you cannot, but in the background, you see a lot of manifestation boards.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like one quick thought about that. Like we're in our minute, basically.
So I have a course called Manifest Your Magnificence, and this is just 12 years. I have another 20 years over there. And really for me, it's who do I need to become in all the different areas of my life, and my health and my relationships and my identity and who I surround myself with and what I'm learning. And those remind me of like who I need to become. And I have my outcomes and my goals in each of those categories. And I give myself a little star when I make it happen. So yes, that is my driver. It's obnoxious for everybody, but I love it. So.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you
Thanks,
very much.
Ronnie.
Everybody give it up for Loren Lahav.
Thanks so much, Ronnie. It was a pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you for sticking with us until the end. To make this content even more valuable for you, please leave a comment below and share your thoughts, and also share this video with somebody you care about who absolutely needs to see this. Thank you very much. Have an outstanding day and see you next time.